Welcome, Spark. So what kind of Spark are you? Player? Creator? Or both? The stories yet to be told. The games to be made. Civilizations and societies to be formed. The universe is waiting for you to bring it to life. Now, how do we begin?
Hey there guys, welcome to another Thursday stream, and this time we're going to be doing something cool. We got two designers here. We have there we go. We have Jed, our lead concept artist and an award winner also for his Project Spark stuff.
A few, yeah.
Yeah, and then we have Matt from our design team as well, who's who you might know from working on some stuff with Champions Quest.
Yeah.
And a lot of that environment design.
Yeah, all the level art for Champions Quest.
Yeah, and so what we're going to be doing is, because we have two really talented designers with us, we're going to be critiquing a community game and going through sort of different design practices to help community members kind of think through design. And we looked through all the levels people sent in, and we thought the one S&D Acid Rain sent, the Desert Treasure level, was sort of closest to it's closest to sort of a bunch of design. It has a lot of design aspects that other levels can cover as well. So like other people who've submitted levels to us, they can take learnings from this and apply them to their own. So for instance, you know, one of the users I see in here, Chargeable, he asked for his level 2. So I think you'll be able to take things that we talk about in here and apply that to your own creations.
Yeah, definitely. I think that this one, the reason we wanted to go to Desert Treasure was not only to find the treasure, but because it's very much like, there's a lot of Spark games that look like this, and so it wasn't kind of something made out of primitives or overtly specific.
Right, exactly.
So I think we're just going to play through first and kind of get an idea. So.
Yeah, and the creator, S&D Acid Rain, says it's about 90% there. He's working on finishing it. He actually, this is a hidden level he sent to us just for this.
Oh, awesome.
So he could kind of get some feedback before publishing. So it's a bit of a platformer.
Platformer adventure.
Yeah, exactly. And you have quests along the way as well.
He's in the chat room, right?
Yep, he is. So apparently we did something that wasn't meant to happen.
Are we climbing this wall? We're not supposed to do that?
I think we're meant to do this.
Aha.
So we go through here. We got a little checkpoint right there.
Oh, cool. If you die, do you respawn there?
Yeah, if you die, or also if you fall off the map, I believe. The intro's broken. Intro seemed pretty good to me. So what are you guys seeing as we're going through this?
I think that like I love seeing him use the desert biome, because that's one of the with starter you get, you know, woodlands and so on and so forth. So we see so much of that, and it is very like a very cool biome. But Arctic and desert don't get enough TLC in my opinion.
Yeah.
And they can be really cool. I think it's one of the funnest biomes to build with for sure.
Yeah, it's got the best variety of like rock shapes as well. And you can bring in desert rocks into like woodland scenes or other scenes and tint them. I think that's something that we haven't seen. We've seen a little bit of, but we haven't seen a ton of.
Yeah, the mixing of two.
Yeah, like we see that a lot more on like the sci-fi stuff. People are really taking the sci-fi, tinting it, changing it, making it fit into a lot of stuff. But the desert stuff is just as good for that.
I think like one of my favorite things to do with mixing biomes is taking the icebergs and tinting those and making those just like, because those are such huge like macro superstructures that you can really change the silhouette of your horizon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this looks fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Point two.
I think it gets harder and harder. The creator of this made one of his first creations, Can You Get to the Top, was a simple idea of getting to the top of a mountain that thousands of people played and had fun with, and also infuriated them because of how challenging it was.
Was it a platformer as well? Like
yeah, so this is this has oh no. I think I pressed some sort of button to get back to the checkpoint. There we go. So yeah, do you guys think you have an idea of what you might want to start adding into here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like when I look at this, I see him. He's blocking out his adventure and his quest, and you know that's the exact same way how we do it here.
Yeah.
We kind of, you know, rough in the mechanics and the puzzles and so on and so forth, and then usually, like Matt will pick it up and direct it, and we'll sit down, or I'll take a screenshot and draw over top of it, and be like, this is kind of what I'm thinking for a lighting scenario.
Yeah.
And like we work in tandem a lot, doing stuff like that on Champions Quest. I think we get some pretty cool results.
Yeah, I think like one of the biggest things that we do, which I see is done in here too, is you want to work in the broad strokes and then whittle your way down, because it'll just, you'll find you spend too much time detailing things, which is like, I mean, it's one of the most fun things to do because it's super easy to do, but it becomes a pain if you need to change anything later.
Sure.
So I think like this is a great spot to even start picking a few locations that you want to really detail out and have be like a running theme throughout the rest of the level.
Be impactful.
Yeah, because then you can take some of these things, like if you have a couple rock shapes that you've bashed together, you can glue them into their own objects, so it's easy to copy, make some assemblies, so that way detailing your level becomes a lot quicker as you go as well. I do a ton of atmosphere stuff. I really like atmosphere, so I'm constantly adding in effects and tinting them to a low opacity and trying to...
This is devious.
I know.
Acid rain. This is devious. Yeah. No, I think.
I think little tunnels like this are great to be able to put some of that stuff in, especially when you're doing kind of wall hugging and stuff along there. It'll help the player have a visual indicator that there's something in there as well, and picking areas that you want to guide the player. I think this has a pretty good direction as it is, so it'll be super easy to be able to start taking those steps.
And there are certain things you could do, like level design is very important. Like level design and beautification. Oh, climbing!
Whoa!
All right. Like good level design, you know, is very much this big broad stroke thing where, you know, spacing between things is super important and getting the feel. And then when you go to art it up, having a tone in mind.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you want this area to seem scary or some sort of like basic emotion that you want to pull out of the player, have that in mind before you start building it too. Like, you know, it really helps your, like, if this place is supposed to seem scary, maybe it's like lit too brightly, for example, yeah. Right? It's, you know, a big beautiful blue sky and some friendly people. If it's supposed to be very inviting, you know, you could play that up more. Like maybe when you get up to the top, there's an oasis here, you know, some stuff like that. And I think with like guiding the player, one of the things to think about is
that was awesome.
That was really cool. You know, kind of like basic design composition. Like when you look at something, I think one of the issues I have, or that I see pop up in a lot of UGC is like when someone's trying to design something that looks natural and it's very symmetrical, right? There are things like that are just basic design principles that just put some thought into it a little bit, you know? Like there's if you're gonna make a big rock formation, unless you want it to be noticeable, don't make it symmetrical, make it feel natural, make it feel like there's, you know, erosion. When you start to like think through these processes, you'll get really cool ideas. That's such a cool climbing effect.
Yeah,
I mean, that's really good points. Like when I'm doing a lot of the stuff, and I've been doing this for about 15 years, so a lot of it I have to think about again. Like when people ask me like why I did certain things, where it's like, yeah, it just makes sense. Like because over time, wherever there's water, there's erosion. One of the things that I do that I think really helps a lot is when I'm doing a path. I think if this is a well-worn path or it's a dirt path and a lot of people have traveled on it. Mm-hmm. I just go through and I remove a little bit of terrain so you get a little bit of a dip down and the grass is higher. Grass is going to naturally have like more dirt or like around the base because of the roots than a normal dirt path. Same thing with trees and stuff. You kind of build up these little subtle things that it's a small detail, but when they're not there, you can really miss them.
That was great, man.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's an awesome avatar too. Oh, is there more?
That he does a level link
nice.
to one of his older worlds. All right, so let's go back into it now then, and let's. I guess Matt, I'm gonna hand the controls over to you.
Okay.
Cool.
Sorry if I messed your level up.
Oh no!
Yeah, I know he's in here now.
It goes in, I swear.
Broken. I love the start screen, by the way. That's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The little like oasis island.
So you have looks like your start's like over in that area.
Yeah, so it looks like you start there,
Mm-hmm.
pathed around.
So one of the first things I would start to do, and Matt mentioned this previously, was kind of start to establish some consistent themes to help guide the player. Like in the desert biome, we have some really cool, really vibrant like fan plants and cactuses and stuff like that that deliberately kind of jump off the screen when you use like the biome tools. So like clustering vegetation around an area where you want to draw the player's eye, so you get that color contrast.
Yeah, and I could totally be screwing up your paint job here. I'm sorry.
Well, that's why
just-
we're
yeah.
locally saving it. We're not saving our.
Oh yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
But because I know, like in deserts, you have a lot more of that layered, just like in our materials here. You have that hard edge change of the different soil types. But when you have a large mountain like this, you can start to really see the tiling. So one of the things I usually do is I go in and I just try to break up some of those a little bit to get a little bit of a soft transition. Rocks are a great way to be able to start going in and doing that. Fortunately, we don't have desert stone chimneys, but
We could
can
send
always
them.
theme them. Yeah.
Stone
So, yeah.
chimneys are your friend.
Yeah, I use those things all over the place.
One of the things I like to do when I build an environment in Spark is kind of establish my defining silhouette shape to the environment like really early on. So again, with like Arctic, for example, you have those really huge macro iceberg shapes, and you can start to build like platforming and terrain out of those. You don't have to necessarily use them as like small little props in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
I think that like with the more successful level creations we've seen where people take props and use them as giant macro shapes and interweave it with terrain, you know, rather than kind of building terrain and then just placing props on top of it. You get a lot more of a natural feeling. That red keeps freaking me out. I feel like we're breaking things.
Yeah. See, I mean, initially, like, you just kind of start hunting and pecking for certain things that start speaking to you. It was the same thing when I was working on the Necromancer level. Like, I had a general idea, but I just started placing stuff, and I started just trying to place anything I possibly could to give me a jumping point, even if it was something that I ended up throwing out completely. It's better to play something that you know doesn't fit. It'll help start pushing you towards what you think will actually work, because then you're like, that absolutely doesn't match anything that I'd like to do. It starts to help you figure out what it is that you're trying to go for.
Yeah, sometimes the wrong thing is just as important as the right thing. Like the exploration of there, or the absence of something could be just as important as something else being there.
Oh yeah. So you use this glow a lot when you're designing. So what is it about this glow that?
It's got a flicker to it. It's also just like when you tint it, like to a low opacity, it just gives a nice color blend between different colors to call things out. Like right now, it's just like a default blue. It might actually work pretty good for that. I'm just kind of trying to get a general idea of like drawing the player into this little area, and so.
So like you're adding a tiny bit more life, so the player's a bit more drawn to.
Yeah,
wanting
and
to
I mean
go to
it's
that checkpoint.
really it's really subtle, but like when you start, because you don't want it to be in your face because it's just a card, right? And it becomes real noticeable when it's clipping through geometry. When you start getting like areas around here where you get some of it peeking around this little edge, it's like it's a little bit more movement. Maybe the player's like actually down here, so they don't see that much of the actual effect. But when you get that flickering, there's something there that's kind of drawing
It's
you
movement,
there.
right?
Yeah.
And in a static environment.
Yeah.
Also, kind of like
yeah.
you know, anyone who's taken an art class or like a painting class or anything, you you always want to, you know, squint at what you're doing, right? And so you should be able to almost take any scene or any part of your level and be able to kind of blur your eyes and squint at it and pick out the shapes and have that impression of where you're supposed to go. That's a pretty good rule of thumb. Is like if I'm just playing Creation Quest and I stop and put the controller down and then like squint at it, I should figure out where I'm supposed to go.
So how important are lights in what you do? Because if you look at you know, showcase levels, things like that, you'll see a lot of lights placed down.
Yeah, lights are hugely important, especially like my default that I really get drawn to is I like really contrasty stuff. I like things that are going to be a little bit more saturated as well. And so I usually try to build up the shadows a lot more, which means I try to get the sun at a good angle to where I'm getting either long casting shadows and finding pools of light, and then I find out of the little pools that I'm getting from the shadow shapes which ones I want to place lights into to kind of help soften it, because when you just have that hard edge by default, we just kind of have a little bit of a hard edge, and that's what I'm trying to soften up here. That's usually like I'll place a kind of a bigger fill light, so this is like the default's usually like 10. I'll crank it up to about 13 or something like that, and then just kind of, again, you just kind of back off, see what, like where it's lighted too much.
So like I can see it outlines the shadows more too.
Yeah, and so we're just kind of trying to soften that, push, and it helps blend the colors between the lit area and the shadows a little bit more. Like we're getting blown out here pretty heavily, so I find if you're, instead of adjusting the size because it's at a good scale, I'll actually go in and adjust the intensity more.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time lighting stuff. That's one of the things Brad really likes to see. So, you know, like getting that like nice bounce light and kind of whatever like presents that area like in the best way, you know. I think like that little glow you put on there was great, particularly in the desert, just because the blues and the oranges, like they
that was one of the first things that I noticed too. Like when we first came across these, it almost looks like a water spring is kicked up, and so that blue would definitely be something that I would try to build off of more, especially since it is like essentially like a save point almost. It's kind of, blue has now become the color of safety for you. So wherever you have like want more of a calming, safe area, I would tend to go a little bit more blue and then kick up a little bit more red or something like that to drop a little bit more of a danger.
It might even be able to be cool to play that up. Like, I don't know the mythos behind the world, but maybe these are little water springs. And there's, you know, a little oasis of like, you know, prop vegetation that's sprung up around these. So it takes that idea and just emphasizes it even more, that whenever you run across one of these things, it's, you know, it's good, and it reinforces that behavior. And then what you can use that for is whenever you use that color or those kinds of props, the player just subconsciously knows that this is a good thing. And so you start to establish these themes of like good and bad, right? Like that mean stuff in your gameplay, but there's really no mechanic built around it. It's just kind of the environment you're existing in that as players we start to interpret.
Yeah. And how do you, question as it kind of spawns another question is, how do you also build while knowing the limitations of things chugging along at, like, you know, starting to chug along if you put in too many effects?
Yeah. It's a constant back and forth, like, honestly. Like, you have to optimize. And at first, I try to find the ones that are going to be the pillars for giving the feeling that I want for that, right? And I'll take out anything around it. Like if I have too many effects around, because effects will slow your frame rate down really bad because you have alpha overdraw. But if you increase the size of it, and if it's a little bit more off screen, sometimes just seeing it kind of off in the distance helps you feel like it's actually the player, it's actually around you as the player. Because when you're actually walking through just like right through the middle of the emitter for the particle effect, you'll get slowed down. And so I'll try to put them a little bit more off to the path or against walls where there's not as much alpha overdraw. Like great spots would actually be kind of like out here a bit more. You could draw You could have like more particles around here where maybe the player doesn't go as much.
So things start to slow down when you get to the center of that effect.
Yeah, well, whenever you have too many translucent like particles and stuff like that,
stack.
That stack upon each other, you get what's called alpha overdraw, and that really kills your frame rate. But it's the size of that particle on screen. So from right here, even though we're drawing like the same amount of like transparency, it'll run just fine. The closer we get to it, we're drawing a lot more transparent pixels on the screen. It slows down because you have way more alpha
that makes
calculations
sense.
going on.
I think we had a question.
Yeah, another good one from Instant Kafkas. The ideas you're talking about, are they good for every game? Is there a risk of design cliches?
They're pretty standard concepts for every game. Like every game I've ever worked on, we always have to watch our effects placement, and anything with alpha, you always have to watch that. It's always going to kill you, as well as leading the player, wanting to soften up shadows in the right spots. Because when you go outside and you look at natural sunlight, you will get some hard edges on things, but you'll also get a lot of areas where it's just a nice subtle blend between light and dark. You're also going to get patches in the shadows. So sometimes it's not bad to go in and maybe put like a blue light like right around here and just kick up
temperature.
Yeah, you're going to get like a little bit more variation in your shadows.
I think that like these are great principles for level building and environment crafting, and like any art form, they're just good rules to understand and break if you have a good reason to, right? One of the things with good design and good art is that it is actually very academic. However, those rules can be broken, but by people who understand them, right? So if you're making your game look like crap intentionally, and you have a purpose for that, then okay. But yeah, there are certainly cliches, and understanding those are important. I mean, design trends.
Yeah. And so one question I know people have, and I've had many times when I've started to build a level, is how do you determine, and at what point do you determine what the sun angle and the sun position is?
I think that it has everything to do with tone and atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like, what are you trying to do? If you're trying to make a spooky graveyard, right? That was a pack we released. And the tone and atmosphere of that was super important, and how we got that was lighting. We put that new sky dome in there, and we dimmed the lights down. We spent a lot of time lighting the shadows, making them really colorated with that sickly green, and just kind of nailed the mood, right? And it just dictated everything. It was like, we want this to be creepy. We want it to feel like, like kind of a scary, spooky, Halloween-y, necromantic feel. And that informed our color decisions. It informed, when you look at the skyline, the silhouette was all the trees, right? When we designed those trees, we wanted them to look like fingers coming up out of the ground. That was the design decision behind those trees. And so when you play that level, you look at the skyline and you see these big, sickly clouds and like these fingers coming up over the skyline, and it automatically just starts to like pull those tones and moods out of the player. And so lighting is so important, lighting and atmosphere.
Yeah.
But it also is like, if your game is something that's like super abstract and your lighting doesn't matter, just crank it up. I think that's why a good reason why we kind of chose to do a level like this is that there is clearly meant to be some sort of, tone to it.
Yeah.
And I think we're still kind of finding that right now. This is what Matt's doing right here is exactly what I was talking about earlier, is using props to break up just the terrain. Because like our terrain sculpting is amazing, but there are things that it can't do. Like it can't give you really clean, crisp edges like that. When you get that big kind of like horned spike coming out, like you'll never be able to really sculpt that with terrain because it's too small.
Yeah, and so I usually will try to just look for really interesting shapes with the rocks, and then crank the size to really big, really small. Again, like I try to go like big first, because the more you can cover with one prop,
Yeah,
the more you can actually go into detail later on.
Yeah, and just to quickly answer, we did not choose this because we thought the design was bad.
No,
if anything, it helps us out.
Yeah, actually, we chose it because it was almost there, so it's a lot easier for us to step in on top of it.
Sure, we definitely can't do a whole level, so we're just pick a little vignetted area and make it look awesome,
Yeah, and again, I'll work this way even when I'm doing bigger levels, like for Champions Quest and stuff. Is I'll try to find one area and really work on it for maybe a couple of hours to see if there's anything there that's clicking that I want to run the theme throughout the rest of the level.
Yeah.
Because from there it makes your life easier. I could go in and I could glue all of these objects together and then start stamping those around and filling in a lot more of that same language.
Oh yeah. I like that term you used there, stamping. You come up with a template of sort of feature a bunch of props, and then you stamp it kind of.
Boom. So I was liking all those shapes together, and then you can scale these around depending on how big you went, rotate, and again you play around until something clicks with you, and you may find something where you're like, that just didn't work at all there.
And one of the things you really want to concentrate on, that scaling makes really easy, is you want a nice combination of large, medium, and small shapes. In compositional kind of theory, right? If you have 3 objects, you have a large one, a medium, and a small one, like 3 stones, your eye just scans them and goes right to the small one.
Huh.
So that's just human psychology, and that's a compositional rule in art and design. And so...
And you get achievements.
So when you have an area, you can really lean on these kind of tried and true methods that the old painting masters used to use, but they still apply to level design. When you walk in somewhere and you want someone to look at something, like when you design a gate, you have a large shape that probably is reminiscent of a wall or a gate or something that kind of draws you in, a medium shape and a small shape, and then you go through the door. And making sure that you have a good combination of those is super important. Your macro shapes, your medium shapes, and your small shapes. Because if everything is the same kind of size, that was one of the things when we first ran through this, all the trees were the same size. It was just you picked a prop and it was boop, 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 boop.
And this is another thing that I do after I've placed a couple rocks and other things that are stacked on top of each other. I'll go through and I just start adding a little bit of terrain to help kind of bleed it in. Great one for the woodlands is being able to use that mossy ivy one. I'll go through and place that in there. You just switch to the add brush, go in, and you start using the actual cursor to find out where it's going to hit and start just blending it in. But even from there, it starts giving you more things, you're getting some different rock texture up there now, and you're getting to start seeing some different light hitting in certain areas. And maybe we'll want to kind of take one of these clouds, and since this is another gameplay area, put a little bit more atmosphere up here.
One of the cool things I love to do in the desert biome too is, this might not be the super appropriate place to do it, but using red bounce light. So when you have a nice warm sun like this, taking something like that, you're doing it already right there. But it's bounce light from the sand. So if you have an object, the sun's coming over, you're casting a shadow right here. It bounces off the sand and comes back, and you get a really nice, warm, natural feeling to it. It just makes things pop and look sophisticated, just instantly.
So here it's bouncing up onto the cliff edge.
Yep, exactly. It's reflecting. It's sunlight reflecting off the sand, hitting the cliff edge.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point, and that's one of the reasons why we have so many lights in our levels, is because we'll go and we'll try to hit those areas. Because right now we're just kind of thinking with the general direction of you're moving into the scene here, but later on you end up going in the opposite direction, right? And so maybe you have to backtrack, and you want this area to be another path that's like well lit as well. And so if you're going through a heavily shadowed area, you can still get a lot of those rich colors by having that bounce light come up. Like you see how it's just not in black shadow anymore as much.
Or putting a pool of water down there and having water reflections flicker on the ceiling, you know.
Start playing around some different.
I don't even know what radiosity is. Someone said bounce light is like poor man's radiosity. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, that's you're trying to simulate radiosity by that, and radiosity essentially is it's when light bounces off of an object that has color. That color is going to transfer with the light of it, right? So you get a white wall, like in the area we're in now. The white wall is getting some of the red from the other wall, and so you want to relay that on. I'll do the same thing when I'm doing woodlands type stuff, but I'll think of the general atmosphere that I want in the woods, which if I have a lot of heavy yellow sunlight, maybe I want to go a little bit more like a greenish blue for like the ambient. And that works because you basically have a forest of green tree canopies. And that's what's happening to the light as it goes through those tree canopies, is you're getting it's going a little more from orange to like more of a bluish green tone. It's cooling off and it's picking up more of the color in that area and bouncing that everywhere.
And like those ideas are really important to nail your atmospheric perspective as well. That's one of the things that really great levels in Spark have good atmospheric perspective. Like there's in our atmosphere there's particulate and there's water, and you know, and at a great distance, when you look at a mountain in the distance, it's almost the color of the sky, right? And so that's atmospheric perspective, and playing that up is just the best way to sell mood, because it gives you like, I mean, a lot of times people are trying to make really dramatic levels, and but it's like a clear blue sky, and you know, it's not like the tone of the environment isn't reflecting that.
Yeah, and right here, like I wanted to start getting something that had a little bit of a different color to it. We're getting, you know, really simple colors from the rock, and I just wanted something that kind of start breaking that up a little bit. So getting these splashes of some saturated greens and reds, they're going to help build up those colors that you already have going on, especially the reds in the desert.
The areas of focus.
Yeah, and it's going to stand out from far away. So these are other ways to start drawing in the player, especially if you find that you have something that's overall just one color in your area. And sometimes it's hard to get away from having everything blend together like that. So you have to experiment around with what might be working.
And the desert biome is designed to be that way. Like the vegetation is meant to pop in a very dramatic fashion. Like when you look at that, right? You blur your eyes, that thing just jumps off the screen, just based on shape and color.
Yeah, and when the concept team when they were laying out all of these different shapes for like this biome, I think the one thing that they did that is absolutely awesome is they're believable as cactuses, but they're also something completely unique, so you can scale them up however you need to. Right. Like they still look like recognizable real-world objects, but we've never seen them before. So you can actually get away with making these giant cactuses,
right?
Really easily.
They're abstract enough.
Yeah,
to where
and it's one of the things that I think really makes Project Spark, Project Spark's visual language and style really easy to work with, because I'm constantly scaling stuff up to the max it'll go, and then I'm also using it like a lot smaller than its default is, and you don't even really notice it. A lot of our stuff scales really well. Rocks scale amazingly well.
Yeah. Another thing that you talked about a bit earlier that I wanted to hear more from on you is the idea of you don't want symmetry to have a good environment.
I think it depends on what you're going for. Like if you're trying to, like in this environment is meant to feel, it's meant to be natural. Like this is a natural mountain. There are man-made areas like the one we're looking at right now with like the kind of planking and so on and so forth. So like the contrast there is really interesting, right? So if how you're starting to contrast that is using very naturalistic, asymmetrical rock formations and paths and clearings and so on and so forth, paired up against very symmetrical man-made objects, then you're starting again to establish a shape language and kind of like repeat these terms and philosophies over and over again. But yeah, generally nature, unless it's like an organic life form, is very just asymmetrical and chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I think a lot of times one of the coolest things I see is when people get really bold with our props. Like, I made one of the first things I did when I was playing with the desert biome was you kind of have these preconceived notions about how the biome should be used, right? And again, it's kind of back to my point about he took the little cactus tree and used it like the same scale kind of everywhere. If you blow that up and make a giant cactus forest, then your experience just changes completely, and you get something that's really unique. You get a really, you know, unique shape language. You know, starting to kind of make up rules, like maybe the ground layer of this thing, of this mountain, is all just these giant cactuses, which reinforces the idea that if you fall off, you're gonna die, right? So, you know, you could do that. You could blow up these giant cactuses, make this the ground level of this mountain just all giant, spiky, terrifying cacti that you're trying to climb out of. It has a lot of cool visual, like compelling visual narrative, as well as kind of like symbology for the actual gameplay.
Mm-hmm. I really like the point right there. I really like how that emphasizes that little curve in the shadow.
Hmm.
It's really cool.
Yeah, so in here, it's just kind of trying to build up a couple of different layers, right? So I'm trying to really highlight the areas that are receiving light and help separate it from the background a little bit more. And so I'll usually crank up the intensity of an object, and then I'll lower its range, so you get a much brighter, smaller little light. And then I just start moving that around until it starts hitting little areas on the models that I think become really interesting, and start giving me looks that I like.
There's a fire there you can play up to.
Yeah.
While we're here, while we're looking at this specific spot, I think one of the things to talk about is light and shadow shapes. They play a huge role in any image, really. They're form defining, but they're also like compositionally defining. So, for example, how he has the light wrapping around this area, and like there's kind of sunlight coming down and hitting the camp is great. Like, I think that's actually really nice. I think you could play it up more. Like, I think you could maybe build some bridges or some props that are higher, that kind of have more shadow, and there's like a more direct kind of beam of light that's coming down. But I think he's actually onto something in that area.
Cool.
And
so
then
S&D just got props from the design team. We got a design team for making this area.
But if you took like something like this area or that, and like pulled it back and just kind of like framed that in light a little bit more,
Yeah.
I think that would be really successful.
So you're talking about wanting to pull this back here.
Or duplicating it so you get a shadow kind of in front of it, so you get like a pocket of light highlighting the camp.
Yeah. So this would be one where, in order to get the shadows to do what I want, I may go in and start
Playing with the direction.
Yeah, just seeing where.
Yeah, at what point do you, like, is that something you want to set kind of near the beginning with the with light?
I think I would try to, but I think that like you have to have these story moments throughout that are impactful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's a thing of contrast. You have areas of interest, clustered interest and importance, and you have areas that, you know, are just kind of like your beautiful areas that you run through. This clearly is a quest giver, so this is an area of importance in this level. So playing up, like designing this area around that specifically would be like, is super important.
Yeah,
like,
you really hit on something that I think about a lot, and one of the reasons why I really enjoy doing level art passes is I try to think of little stories that aren't necessarily even tied into the main function of the gameplay sometimes, but just like finding a little nook and trying to have a little story there of like when someone's getting to run through your environment, like maybe they come across something, they make up a story of their own on like why these little elements are together. Like maybe it's like a cave that's got a couple tables in it, and maybe a sleeping bag, and there's just a few things, but it's like maybe someone just camped out there for a night, or like what happened to that person. It makes it feel like it's more alive, and it's not just really linear visually story wise. Yeah. It gives it some background,
the narrative kick.
Yeah,
and a lot of times like everything we do in the concept art team is like, even if we have to make up something that seems so mundane, like to give us context, we do it anyway. Like even if no one will ever see it, you have to put that effort in if you want to make it compelling. Like, who is this person who has the camp? Mm-hmm. Why is she there? Where's all her stuff? Is she waiting for you? Is she, those mm-hmm. kinds of things that actually help you sell a scene. And like what I was saying like earlier about clustered detail is exactly what Matt's doing right now. He's throwing in a big rock, and there's little areas where vegetation will kind of cluster up and build, and you can see how he's strategically putting these things in meaningful places rather than kind of going through every 10 feet and dropping a cactus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You kind of want to try to, the best you can, give the illusion that there's a lot more going on than there necessarily is sometimes, as well as I also place the vegetation here because when you do get rainfall, this is where the water would tend to build up more. So there's going to be a lot more vegetation here.
So you actually place that because you thought about naturally.
Yeah, and when you think about that stuff enough, it just becomes like second nature. Yeah. I try to reuse an asset that I find really useful as many times as I possibly can before it becomes really noticeable. And then once it becomes noticeable, trying to tweak things, but it's really trying to work as smart as you can without having to like just go in and do all this crazy detail that might look cool, but it doesn't make sense together when you look at it as the picture.
Or it's too distracting.
Yeah, that's another one that like we talk about quite a bit when we're looking at stuff. Yeah. Is visual noise, and trying to steer clear of it and trying to have a good clear path. So yeah, all these things that I place, like they fill in spots that were just empty terrain before, but they give enough interesting shapes and shadows and light pools mm-hmm. And little color breakups that now, while it's busy, it's still all guiding you along the main path. It's not taking away from it. Right. And mm-hmm. that's kind of what you want to do. You want to build out in when you're doing, like when you're working along the path. And so it's just something to think about, like having bigger scaled objects too on the outskirts of your main paths help fill in that empty space. And then you start bringing in smaller details to where the player's actually going to see it. And that's when you have like the little pockets of other detailed clusters in the environment later on that aren't necessarily story driven, and it's really enjoyable when you're building stuff to think in that manner of, oh, maybe there's like a little encampment here, like in one of the levels I'm working in now has nothing to do with the story, but I built in a little hidden area like a little camp that someone's got that was actually spying like on another household. And it's like, I don't know like necessarily, like I don't have a story behind it other than like it just is a neat little story. And when I showed someone else, like they filled in kind of the blanks of their story. It's like a sketch. When you look at a sketch as opposed to a finished piece, your mind fills in all the details of everything. And so it's kind of the same thing in a level. As you're kind of giving a little bit of a story sketch of maybe something happened here, but people will fill in a story that they think fits.
And I think that like that's a really, really important part of the creative process as well, is that kind of iterative stuff. Like, this is interesting to you, so you do it, right? And then someone else picks up where you left off. Like, there have been so many times in this team where someone just did something cool, and it turned into, everyone was like, whoa! And then it turned into something else completely, Mm-hmm. And it inspired someone else to make something even cooler, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'll say with most of the things I've created in Project Spark, like most of the game mechanics I made because of interesting glitches I found when I was testing around and stuff that I wanted to continue to exploit to make something interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, see, like for me, I think this little island out here is like a little interesting story. And see, yeah, I was drawn to it, and there's a little guy out there. Mm-hmm. I haven't played the level, but it's exactly what I'm kind of going for. Like, I was naturally drawn to it. This is just a great...
Well, I think that the contrast he's using here is a big part of that, too. Like, there's this area with water, and then there's a framed island mm-hmm. right in the middle. I think it might be two perfectly in the center there.
Yeah.
But, like, when you look through there, you see this silhouette of this tree, and it's just calling you over there, because it's completely different than everything else on the screen right now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and he said that's where the shoes in the quest are going to be on that island.
Ah, okay.
that's good.
Without, that's kind of that's your role as a level designer when you're doing this stuff, is you have to try to guide the player without sitting there in real life telling them, oh, you go over here, you go over there.
Yeah.
So you have to leave clues, and then those clues are going to be visual a lot of times, unless you're just going to straight up do it through like text narration, or even the way you choose to point a camera. If you have a cutscene where that camera comes to an end, like, or where that camera ends after the cutscene, you kind of want to have a pointing in the direction of where they need to go, and you want to make that shot look really interesting. And after a while, once you start doing it, it just starts to become a lot more easy. You start to know these things, and again, like you were saying, like, well, how do you pick like the sun angles that you want at first? You start figuring out where the spots gameplay wise are. They are really important, and you start with one of those going, okay, I know at some point you're gonna have to go this direction, so maybe I'll just work on making this shot read really well. Because once you have one set up, you can then make adjustments to the others, whether it's removing terrain or adding terrain to get a shadow to frame it, or maybe you need to add more lights or something more interesting. And so it just becomes kind of a natural tumbling process almost.
Do you guys have any questions about kind of like what we do here, or?
Yeah, everyone in chat, do you have other general questions about design and Project Spark design and Champions Quest design, or just other design things in general? Someone was asking about, because we have somebody who's working on Champions Quest, if we can give more info on episode 2. We can't yet. We cannot give more info on that yet. Yeah, exactly. It is cool. And yeah, Matt's one of the people trucking away on it.
Yes, he is. Goblin Wars.
Yeah. And that might not be the name of it, also. We may be changing that name.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Do you guys have any tips for terrain tinting and scaling?
Yeah, so tips on terrain tinting scaling with the Epic Artist pack.
Yeah, you can do some pretty cool things. Like, I've been pretty heads down. Like, I wasn't as involved with like that pack, so I haven't had tons of exposure with all the stuff in it yet to like really give some really good tips. But I mean, stuff that I have seen that I just really enjoyed was people have used the terrain movement and stuff like that in really cool ways with gameplay. Yeah, I mean, Lava was like one of the ones that we showed and stuff too. But like, the fact that you can now tint terrain is pretty exciting, and I mean, I'm excited to see what people are going to end up doing with it. It's a good way. I think it'll be really useful on like the stone and the tile materials that we have. Because those ones can be really difficult to blend into the environment more naturally, like with the transitions.
Well, I would like. I mean, it's depending on what you own, though, right? But like, when you look at this level, for an example, it would be really cool to take like the moon biome and bring it in and tint it to look like it matches the desert, and start to break up those kind of default tiling textures with like giant, like the moon craters, but tinted to look like desert. Like stuff like that. I love seeing when people get really clever with it.
Yeah.
And it's just, when you look at it and you're like, what, like, wait, something like this looks like awesome. How did they do that? And then you have to think about it for a second. I also think that like people have been building some really cool, very unique environments because of that. Like you're able to now make more fantastical environments out of these textures that were designed to be Arctic or desert or woodlands, so on and so forth.
And also for Epic Artist Pack, one specific tip is I found that the castle rooftop terrain, if you scale the Y all the way down and turn all the brown, you make some pretty cool wood paneling.
Oh yeah.
That you can use for inside. Another question I saw is someone was asking about when you have nighttime scenes. This is a daytime scene, so it's some might say it's a bit easier to work with. When you have a nighttime scene, how do you work with the dark lighting and making sure that it's dark enough to be nighttime but light enough to be...
That's a good question. I think one of the things that we do a lot, I mean, again, it depends on what kind of game you're making, but I generally use a lot more lights when it's a darker scene, just to make sure things are tastefully but ambiently lit. You're working with a less direct light source. I also tend to parent lights to my characters a lot, faking what's called ambient occlusion, right? So, like, if you have a character in a night scene, oftentimes they're very hard to see, so if you parent a little light in your assembly over top of your character, that's just kind of just a pale moonlight or something, right? It just makes them just pop that much, So when it's a night scene, I tend to do a lot more stuff like that, where it's just kind of like very fine-tuning those little things that might get lost because it's dark.
Yeah, having a light attached to the character is pretty important for nighttime environments. But again, the same rules as daytime apply. You're going to want it to you're still going to get some shadow and you're still going to get light pools. It's the same thing with interiors as well. Like in Champion's Quest 1, when we had the cave environment, I was blasting holes in the ceiling to try to find interesting pools of light. And then I did the same thing that I did here, which was going in and placing lights around those pools of light to kind of help fill in. And you're going to get bounce light. Light, no matter how dark it is usually always in that environment. And so you're going to get bounce light, you're going to get light pools. And the nice thing about having nighttime stuff is you start to be able to build up the pools of light from fires and torches and other things. And that's where it becomes really important in making sure that you have the player's path lit well. And that can be using like, a nice saturated orange, just kind of off into the distance, but maybe the rest of the environment is filled with more of a natural light, which is going to be closer to the shadow color. So maybe you're getting more of a little bit more of a greenish light coming from the sky, and it's going to make that orange off in the distance really, really pop. And then once you get to that area, it's going to have a completely different feeling to it. Again, nighttime environments,
color temperature.
Really, color temperature.
Playing with color temperature, like, if you turn on the night sky, you get this nice saturated blue feeling, right? And like you were saying, if you have like, I think a fire, like a bonfire, is probably the best example, where you get this contrast of this warm orange.
Well, it's what I did in the Necromancer Showcase level.
Yeah, exactly that.
And even in that was not necessarily a nighttime environment. It was going to be, it was a lot more stormy and dark. So in the forested kind of wooded area, I had a really bright contrasty fog, like off in between the trees, and that's another great use to help guide the players, just getting a little bit more of that ambient fog. Like here, I'm doing it with kind of more of a dust kick up.
What's your favorite atmospheric particle?
What's the name of that one?
That was actually another one of the questions, so it's kind of
ambient cloud A. I use like a madman.
And you blow it up?
Yeah, I scale it like crazy, and by scale it like crazy, I mean like I'll crank that thing up super high to fill in areas that you're never going to get to. But like right here where we have kind of the horizon with the sky and the water, right? It's great areas to help fill in a little bit more of that. Yeah, get the atmospheric perspective, as well as going really, really small with it and getting it just in maybe the gap between a rock and a wall, so you get just a little bit of ambient fog in there.
As far as like depth goes, I think in answer to your question, I'm not sure who asked it, but that atmospheric perspective, that fog, that particulate in the atmosphere is what sells that, and just being really dramatic with that just helps so much.
Yeah.
Like when you look at the horizon line, right? Like if you were going to finish this level, you don't want to see the edge of the water there, right? So what you might do is kind of go blow up, like sculpt some huge terrain, really cool shapes out there that kind of hide that, and then throw a bunch of atmospheric fog in front of it, so you actually feel like you're in a real environment.
Oh yeah, that's actually a question I've heard people ask before is getting rid of the line, like the water line at the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does take some work, and it can be hard to do.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It's definitely possible.
I think a lot of times that gives a really cool effect.
Yeah.
But also it is something that, like, whenever I make a game, that's one of the first things I take care of, is just making sure that, like, when my character runs up and looks out over the distance, it feels like you're in an actual space, something that's, you know, cool and inspiring, and you're just faking that you can see forever, you know? Like, you could totally take these rocks, blow them up huge, take them out there and start building mountainscapes with them, you know?
Yeah.
There's a screenshot I did, I think they released it somewhere, and it was like the ranger standing on a rock looking up at this, like, monolithic rock.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think we actually used that in a Facebook image or something recently.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So that was a screenshot from one of my levels, and that was pretty much like exactly what I did. Is I built this giant mountain out of like chimneys and rocks and stuff like that, and then like would kind of just build it in the background. And when you were running around the level, you just felt like you were encapsulated in this mountain range, and it felt pretty nice.
It's cool. And since we only have a few minutes left, do you want to show kind of what you've been making in play? Are you ready to
sure,
show where you are?
If you want to guide. I mean,
sure.
Again, this is just kind of trying multiple different ideas, trying to see if there's anything that is standing out to me. Like, one of the things I was really liking was the dust kind of effect that the ambient clouds was giving. I also really was starting to build up some more of the sharp rock feel, like maybe to the top of the mountain. Like the mountain has worn away more naturally at the bottom, but it's crumbled off more at the top, where you're going to get weaker spots of rock, so sharper, jagged rocks.
Yeah. So I don't think we touch any of this part.
No, yeah, sorry, it's a little bit away, but that's kind of how it usually goes. Like,
you know what?
You're gonna have to make him fly, I think.
Yeah. I might do that. Actually, let's see. Where are we?
I mean, the biggest piece of advice, like, I think I could give is just try anything. Don't be afraid if it doesn't work. I do things a lot that I'm just so glad people aren't watching me on live streams. But when you do that, you end up learning quite a bit and finding things that you can put into your tool bag of tricks. And also,
You just said that won't work.
Yeah, there's code in there.
And also, like, if you have a mood or a visual style, like, in mind, like, that you're trying to mimic, like, look at screenshots, look at the colors that they're using in it, and just take those, like, be inspired by those, because the way you interpret that screenshot or that painting or whatever, you're going to be drawn to different elements of it than someone else. And
one
so
of the
you're
things,
seeing them differently.
like how we do Champions Quest, is me and Matt will brainstorm like some ideas. Like, we want this area to take place in a cave, and I'll just do a bunch of paintings, and they're just very much mood and color and shape. And the reason I don't build them as Spark is to get us out of that zone, right? Is like, oftentimes we can keep making the same thing in Project Spark, but the reason that I do it I make an effort to make it feel a little bit different than Spark is so that we feel inspired by that. And and a lot of them are just super rough in their color and their atmosphere and shapes, and like I think we were working on a cave once, and we got some really cool stalactites that we were like, oh, that would be a cool shape to get in there, you know. Or we did we shouldn't talk too much about Champions Quest 2, huh?
Yeah.
We did one. There was a painting I did in Champions Quest 2 that I just did.
Super secret painting.
Episode 2. That we had no intention of being kind of like an area, and but one of the environment guys was like, "That's super cool." So he built it, and we were like, "Whoa!" So we kind of like designed this level around this kind of It was a very optimistic painting I did, and I was like, we're never going to be able to get away with this.
Yeah, yeah.
And but people, like, somebody on our team built it, and it turned out to be, like, really cool. And it was really just based on, like, a basic idea. Never going to get over it.
I can get it. I can go a bit faster.
That's like a really kind of funny mechanic. Like you can fly, but you're gonna go really fast and straight.
Yeah. Oh no. Oh wait. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, I like this.
Yeah, so if you look to the right, you can even see like after I had done some lighting there, and then I went back in and started placing rocks, I'm getting a little bit of bouncing light on those rocks that weren't even there when I started doing it at first. And so like when you go into a game, like to gameplay mode, you may be like, oh, that's really cool. That's something I want to build up more.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And so that's where you go in and start building that out more.
Then use.
I think that looks really nice. Like if you stop right here and just look at this scene that Matt's been working on, if you look over to like the left of the screen, like the upper left part, you have this really nice natural feeling silhouette now against the mountainside, and so you have these jagged edges and like vegetation coming up, and it doesn't feel like a kind of a lumpy just terrain anymore. Like it has some life and some character and some like you're breaking the silhouette now.
You know, a really cool thing is it almost looks like, because of the jaggedness, it almost looks like kind of an open mouth with like teeth clamping down.
Yeah, see, and those are the kinds of things that you're gonna want to try to do. Is like find something in there that you see that excites you, and then you can start to build up. Because now that you even said that, like you could go in and start placing some skulls and building that up more.
Yeah, making a big grizzly maw for a cave. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the first thing that I was trying to do is just kind of. It's kind of like when you start drawing and you start with an empty sheet of paper. The first thing I think a lot of people want to do is get rid of as much white as possible.
Yeah.
And once you start doing that, you can start to see things. Your brain's going to start recognizing shapes and patterns that you naturally get drawn to, and you're going to start getting ideas, and then you're going to kind of keep building upon that. It's the exact same thing when I approach doing level art. Like I'm just not thinking necessarily. Like I didn't know that I wanted to place a cactus here or a rock there. I'm just kind of trying to fill as much empty space as I can, as quickly as I can, to start getting some ideas, and then from there I start realizing where I want to detail.
Yeah. It's looking really cool.
Log Doctor, you should remix it and make your character Japanese.
Yeah.
We've got a really great character creation system in place.
Yeah. Well, really, really cool. I think it also shows that if you do good design, it does take time.
Yeah.
To get it to the right place, because we got like a.
Yeah, and I mean, in the way that I, like what I end up doing into the level would be completely different than like the way Jed would go about it, like as far as what he'd end up finding and being drawn to. And that's what I think is really exciting. Especially, I got really excited when I started seeing what everyone in the community was doing.
Yeah.
Really awesome things. I've gotten so used to working with the assets in a certain way, especially like with Champions Quest, that when I see some of the creative ways that you guys are using these things, re-inspires me to try harder to think about how I can combine all of these different elements into some of the crazy creations that I've seen you guys do.
We get great ideas from them.
Oh,
too.
hugely. Your guys' stuff is really amazing. Like we're inspired by you guys so much, and so it's really nice to be able to come in and kind of show you like the process that we go about in doing some of the stuff, because we feel like that's what you guys are doing for us. And so thank you.
Two-way conversation.
Yeah,
definitely. Well, thanks everyone for listening in, for asking us all the questions. I hope you learned some interesting things here. I actually learned a lot myself listening to this. I didn't go to art school, so this is like my own little hour of art school here at school.
Sorry, I tend to mumble when I work. So
no, that was all really cool stuff. Yeah. And we'll catch everyone. Actually, tomorrow we have a stream where we will be having a bunch of Team Dakota devs playing your community levels.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Create your game as you play? Any Spark can do it. Spark, activate the portals.